Today we are making boxes. The first step with any project is to mill up your starting material. So the first thing we're doing is we are cutting this board down to 4.5 inches wide. When you are cutting a piece this long on the table saw, make sure that you get a partner to help you with catching. Up next, we are taking this over to the bandsaw and we are going to cut this board in half. Right now the board is 5/4 thick and we're trying to make boxes that are only 1/2 inch thick. If we try to take that 5/4 material over to the planer before we cut it in half, it would be incredibly wasteful. Now we can get 2 boards out of it. We're sending it through the planer, and we are going to plane these boards down to just over 1/2 inch for our starting width. Once again, you want to make sure that you get someone to help you catch. After this, we are going to go right over to the chop saw, and we are going to cut these down to 32 inches long. It's okay to stack them like that. So after this stage, now we have 6 boards that are all 32 inches long by 4.5 inches wide by 1/2 inch thick. Once we have all of our material milled up, we can start building our box. First step, we're going to go over to the jointer. We're going to make sure we have one straight flat edge. Then we're going over to the table saw. We are going to cut this right at 4 inches. We're going to make sure that we make the board stay perfectly tight to the fence. This is very important because any little mess ups on this box is going to make it not be perfectly square. Up next, we're going to get our table saw sled. As you saw, there's 2 little lines telling you the marks at which we are going to be cutting our pieces on this. We are cutting them at 8 inches and 4.5 inches. It is very important that our pieces are the exact same size. So what you're going to do is you're going to rough cut them a little bit bigger first, and then you're going to stack them on top of each other, make sure that the backs line up, and then cut them both at the same time so that we can have them be the exact same size. Now that we've got all 4 of our pieces, we're going over to the router table. We are going to be cutting our rabbets right now. As you can see, I'm using the other piece there as my backing. That is so that we can prevent chip out. We can prevent the wood from splintering. Now we're going to be running our dados. This, we don't need to use a back scrap piece of wood because we are using a compression bit on this. It allows for no chip out. It's very fancy. Now that we got all of our dados cut, we're going to be heading back on over to the table saw. For this specific box, we are going to be cutting the top of one of our small strips off so that we can build a box that has a sliding lid. We will show you that later on in this video. At this point, we are going to be cutting plywood for the bottom of our box. We do not need to cut a top at this stage because we will be cutting that later on. So now we've got all of our pieces ready, and we've got our bottom, we've got our sides. Up next, we're going to go over and sand. It is a good idea to sand the inside of your box before you glue up. The reason for this is because it is very difficult to get to the inside of your box after you've already started gluing up. Up next, you're going to clean off all the sawdust from your pieces, and then you're going to start your glue up process. First, we're using those little blue pieces of tape to prevent squeeze out on the inside since it's difficult to get to the inside. Those small pieces, you had to kind of line up the tape very carefully, so make sure that you line up the tape on that one. Now we're slicing off the ends of that tape. That way we can prevent all the squeeze out on the inside. Up next, we're going to use a little bit of blue tape to keep this box completely together before we get to the clamp up stage. That just helps us to not split it apart. It makes the clamping a lot easier. So we used a little bit of blue tape on all those edges. We got it all glued up. Now we're clamping. We want to put one clamp in each of the corners in each direction. That way we can get perfect clampage on our entire project. Last couple steps, make sure you write your name on it and clean up all the squeeze out, and that is glue up.